Okay, I'm going to get started as more people trickle in. We're just going to go over some basic intros, so not a big deal, but hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Secrets of Excel Lookup Functions, sponsored by MorphRaps. My name is Stephanie and I will be your moderator for this event. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. I have with me today Bill Jelen. So Bill is the host of MrExcel.com and the author of 68 books about Microsoft Excel, including Excel Gurus Gone Wild, Pivot Table Data Crunching, and Excel Inside Out. He has made over 80 guest appearances on TV's Call for Help with Leo Laporte and was voted Guest of the Year on the Computer America radio show. He has produced over 2,500 episodes of his Excel video podcast, Learn Excel from Mr. Excel. And he was also a three-time commentator for the Excel World Championships broadcast on ESPN. Lately, he worries a lot about the Excel advice that is given by the new artificial intelligence tools and wonders how his former accounting 101 professor would react to the concept of a bot hallucinating accounting results that change from day to day. However, he is cautiously honing a Mr. Excel GPT bot with all of the knowledge from hundreds of hours of his YouTube videos and books. But before founding MrExcel.com in 1998, Jelen spent 12 years as a financial analyst for the accounting, finance, marketing, and operations departments of a publicly held company. As in some basic housekeeping, you will receive the slides and the recording from today's webinar within the next 24 hours. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And then at the conclusion of the webinar, there'll be just a really quick survey about your experience. Your participation in the survey will be greatly appreciated. And as a reminder, you must complete 3 out of the 4 live poll questions during this webinar in order to receive your CPE credit. And Bill will email those to you directly within the next week. And now a little bit about us. MorphRaps is a certified Microsoft and Oracle partner. We have over 400 customers and 34,000 end users. We offer nearly 30 out-of-the-box wizards and modules built specifically for organizations running on Oracle E-Business Suite and Oracle Fusion Cloud applications. But let's get to what we're really here for. So Bill, I'll let you take it over.
Right. Hey, I'm excited about today's topic. VLOOKUP is my favorite feature in all of Excel. And today we're going to talk about not just VLOOKUP, but index and match, and the new XLOOKUP, and some really obscure things like choose and switch and ifs and things like that. So everything we're talking about today is in this book. Actually, I should share my screen so you can see the book. Let's do that. Okay, yeah, so everything we're going to talk about today is in that book, Mr. Excel 2024, Igniting Excel. And because you're here today, you get a free copy of that book. I will drop into the chat the URL where you can download that. That is a Dropbox URL. I know some companies can't get to Dropbox. If so, let us know. Figure out another way to get it to you. The big 3 topics today are VLOOKUP, troubleshooting VLOOKUP, index and match, and then XLOOKUP. And then we'll take a look at some other lookup options and it's something brand new called choose calls, and maybe even a way that we can use artificial intelligence. So yeah, we'll see about all that. But let's get started off. Actually, I want to do a CPE question just right off the top here. And that's CPE question 1, just to get a sense of whether you're a VLOOKUP person, index and match person, or what. So Stephanie, we could show that one.
Yeah, so, I just launched it.
Great. Question number 1, which is your favorite? A, VLOOKUP, B, index and match, C, XLOOKUP, or D, the ancient lookup function that goes way back, like all the way to VisiCalc. Used to be that lookup could do one thing that nothing else could do, but that's not true anymore. So it's been replaced.
We'll give everybody a few more seconds, especially because it's right off the bat.
Yeah, right. Like what? A CPE question already? Doesn't even say anything.
Yeah. All right, last call, last chance. Okay, I think we're
all right. Good. So that's a lot of VLOOKUP and a lot of XLOOKUP and 5 index and match people. It's always easy to know if you're working with an index and match person because they tell you every day how superior their index and match is to your VLOOKUP. But yeah, we'll take a look at all that. So let's get started with VLOOKUP 101. For me, when I was working at a company and finally promoted to manager, I just had one requirement, and that's that you could do VLOOKUPs. Like you could do VLOOKUPs without even thinking about doing VLOOKUPs. You could do them in your sleep was my joke. Or you could do VLOOKUPs with your eyes closed. There was actually a job posting at the company I worked for in Akron, Ohio, where I was the hiring manager, and the only requirement was could do VLOOKUP with your eyes closed. That first person, she could do VLOOKUPs really well. Next time, though, we asked for people skills in addition to that. So, all right. So here we go. We have two data sets on the left-hand side. Item, date, quantity, and description. This data came from the IT department. It has hundreds or thousands of rows of data, and it's exactly what I asked for, but not really what I needed. I said, hey, I need sales by item and date. So they gave me date, they gave me quantity, but then they gave me item number, right? And this goes back to some deep-seated fear in the IT department that we're going to run out of disk space. You know, the network drive is going to fill up. So rather than give you a nice 25-character item description field, they just give you the short item number field. Today disk space is really cheap. When I started, I remember like disk space was furniture. It was huge, right? The IT department had this huge disk drive. I mean, now in our pocket, we're carrying 256 gigabytes around. I think they could have afforded to give us the description. All right, but so we have those item numbers, and we need to get the descriptions. Now, look, I'm going to give a shout out to my brother. My brother, 10 years older than me, he was an IT guy, right? But he could not use Excel to save his life. So he would get data like this, W25-6, and he would do this crazy thing where he'd cruise down through until he found the W25-6, and then he would copy, Control-C to copy and come back here and paste, right? And this would take him an hour to go through this. And, we talked almost, I don't know, every day. Like here, CR50-4, this was always a big one for Bob because he would get to paste two in a row without having to go look another one up. And then BR26-3. And you can just imagine how slow this would be. And he would call me and he would tell me what he had done. And I'm like, VLOOKUP. He's like, I can never remember that. I'm like, this is embarrassing, right? Your brother is Mr. Excel. You can't just be sitting around here copying and pasting this whole thing. All right, so with VLOOKUP, the way that it works, equal VLOOKUP. The V, by the way, stands for vertical. It means the lookup table is vertical. We're looking up the item number. That's the lookup value, right? Okay, and then I realized this next part, there's 3 different ways to do it. But the way that I've always done it is I come here and I choose the table array. So I started in L3, Control-Shift down, Control-Shift right. Really, I just hold down Control-Shift while I press down and right. And then, because of the way that I did it, I have to press the F4 key to put the dollar signs in. Those dollar signs make sure that we're always pointing to rows 3 to 30. Even as this gets copied down to row 100 or row 500, we're still always coming back up to this lookup table in 3 to 30. And then comma, and it says, which column do you want? I'm looking for description. So in this case, description is the second column. And then just because we have to, right? The choice here says approximate match or exact match. You never want to choose approximate match. Well, not never, but 99% of the time you're going to choose an exact match because we don't want almost the right item. Almost the right item, like BG 33-31 is not the same as BG 33-3. Like it's not going to be the right product, not going to be the right price. Just all kinds of disasters that'll happen there. All right, so we get our first answer there. And then once we have that formula in, we'll double click to copy that down, right? Now, every time that you do this, you need to cruise down through that column D looking for one specific error. And I have to tell you, I used to hate the error, right? But now I actually kind of appreciate the error because the NA is saying, hey, this item over here, BG 33-9 is missing from the table. Like either was a typo when they entered the order or is a brand new item that we don't have and you need to add it to the table. All right, so I come up here and I look and there's a BG 33-8, but there's not a BG 33-9. So for me, now somewhere in the middle of the table, anywhere in the middle of the table, I have to insert a row. So I come here, home, insert cells. I selected all 4 and shift cells down, right? And the reason that I do that in the middle is this lookup formula is referring to that last row, right? So by inserting something above the last row, the lookup table automatically grows. I've met people who, instead of building the formula like I built it, they simply point to the whole column like this, L through O, right? And that actually is a really good way to go. You don't have to worry about adding, you can just add things to the bottom, provided there's nothing below the table, right? So, I appreciate that as a great alternative. And if that's what you do, then that's fine. All right, so here, BG 33-9, and we'll figure out what it is. It's the more for apps belt thing. Those are very valuable dollars, and it's something. All right, so fill in the item, and then your NA goes away. If I really had a bunch of these and I needed, like if I didn't want to just page through, I would always sort descending. That'll bring the NA values to the top. Okay, so that's VLOOKUP 101. Let's talk about some things with troubleshooting. What happens when VLOOKUP stops working? And I have a couple of things that you can watch out for, right? The first thing I'm interested in is if your VLOOKUP slowly stops working. Like you got a few that work at the top, and then slowly more and more NAs start to creep in. And I'll show you that. All right, so here we had a few that work, and then a couple of NAs, and then a few more that work, and then finally the last one that works, and all the way, the rest of the way, it's NA. And that is a clear sign that when you enter the VLOOKUP, you forgot to put the dollar signs in. So, here this first formula is getting the red range, if you can see that. So we're getting everything from L3 down to row 31. But then as I copy down, because I didn't put the dollar signs in, see that part of the formula that refers to L through O is moving down as I copy it down. So you start to run into one, like this was one of the first items, RG78-2, and you see it's, or -25, you see it's outside of the table now. That's why we get the NA, you can't find it, right? And then eventually down here, everything that it's looking for is down in this red range that's completely below the data, right? So if you see the NAs start to slowly appear, then that's almost a sure sign that you forgot to put the dollar signs in. And for me to put the dollar signs in, I go back into edit mode, select just the colon and press F4. And that puts all 4 dollar signs in, just a good way to do that. And then double click to copy the formula down. All right, so that's the first thing that can go wrong. I've seen a lot of other things go wrong, and it just annoys me so much when they go wrong. Like in this case, these next 3, they're all NAs all the way down. Like none of them work. And so my reaction to that is, I almost have to call my brother because he's an expert at this. BG33-8, let's go find it. BG33-8, there it is. Like it's very clear that it's here and it's here, and there's no reason why Excel shouldn't be able to do this. Okay, so what we're going to do over here in this BG33-8, I'm going to press F2, and I watch for the flashing insertion point. I hope that Zoom is catching that flashing insertion point because it's right after the 8, BG33-8, and then the insertion point. And then I'm going to come back up here and do the same thing. Press F2 to put it in edit mode. And check this out. We are a couple of spaces away from the 8. That means that someone who typed this in, or maybe an old mainframe system, delivered the data to us in BG33-8 space, right? And those spaces, you can't see them unless you're in edit mode, but that causes the VLOOKUP to not work. So what do? We come here to A2, and instead of looking for A2, I'm going to ask for the trim of A2. Trim of A2 gets rid of leading and trailing spaces. Also in Excel, it gets rid of, if someone had typed Bill space Jelen, it'll make it into Bill space Jelen. Like any 3 spaces in the middle will be replaced with 1 space, right? And that gets our formula to start working again. All right, so always look for trailing spaces. And of course, if the trailing spaces were on this side, you'd have to insert a temporary column K, do a trim of the whole column, and then copy and paste values. Okay, so you just have to figure out where the trailing spaces are and fix those. Right, so that's the first one. I'm gonna jump ahead too. I've only seen this error once, and it was at one of my live seminars. The guy came up to me before the seminar. He said, "Hey, I've got a problem in my Excel," and he opened it up and he said, "Look, I'm sure that I've written this VLOOKUP correct. It's exactly right. I'm looking up this 1.8 over here. There's a 1.8, and it's not returning iceberg, and nothing I can do can make this work." Right? And the guy was just so wrapped up in this problem and trying to get the VLOOKUP to work. He was so frustrated. But can you see it? Can you see what the like this isn't our data, so we're completely new to this. Can you see what the obvious problem is? His lookup table, all of these items were negative, and all of these items were positive. And of course, Excel can't see that at all. I think in this particular case, I just said, let's put a -1 up here and copy to the clipboard, Control-C, and then select all of this data, and we're going to go into paste special. right down here at the bottom of the paste dropdown, paste special. And we're going to multiply that -1 that's on the clipboard by all of those numbers. Click OK, right? And that quickly changes them all back to positive numbers. And then the VLOOKUP starts to work. All right, and then here, the last one. This is like probably the second most common problem that I see all the time, where we have 43.99 over here, 43.99, and over here, 43.99. Right, so it's clearly in both places, but the VLOOKUP is not seeing it. And if you look over in cell A2, there's a green triangle there. That green triangle is telling us that there's a problem. Here, the numbers right aligned. It's their actual numbers. I can tell their numbers because when I select them, I can see the sum of those numbers. But over here, they're left aligned. We got the green triangle. And when I select a bunch of them, if I look down in the status bar, it's just telling me that there's 4 non-blank cells, but it doesn't tell me what the total is because it's not seeing these as numbers. Okay, so we have text over in column A and numbers in column L, and VLOOKUP can't see the match between those. I have an amazingly fast way to convert those text numbers to regular numbers. So I select the data like that, and then it's a great keyboard shortcut. It's 3 keys in sequence. It's Alt-D, D as in David, E as in Edward, F as in Frank. So Alt-D-E-F, let me do that, Alt-D-E-F will convert all those text numbers to regular numbers, right? What a great little shortcut that is. I was doing a live seminar, someone said, oh no, hey, just do Alt-D-E-F. I used to do these crazy things like put the 1 in a blank cell, copy, and paste special multiply. And you're like, you don't have to do that. Alt-D-E-F is a cool shortcut. And if you actually go look, Alt-D in the old days would open the data tab, and then E was text to columns right here, and then F is finished. So just going through text to columns makes those. All right, so let me let's put up CB question number 2. And we'll take a look at that. All right, question number 2. Which shortcut key quickly converts text numbers to numbers? Is it Alt-ABC, Alt-DEF, Alt-GHI, or Alt-XYZ?
I'm going to give everybody some time to answer.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Good. See, we have more people here, so that's good. And you just have to get 3 of these. So if you miss the first question, you're fine.
I'll give you guys 5 more seconds. All right, last call. Oh, they're still trickling in. All right, I'm gonna end it. Okay, there you go.
Okay, great. So Alt-D-E-F, Alt-D-E-F. It's funny. It's funny. Let me undo that. I'm going to undo. Whoops. Oh, shoot. I hate that undo doesn't work on just this workbook. It undo does everything in every workbook. Microsoft should really fix that. Of course, I suppose they have bigger fish to fry. But yeah. All right. So at this point in a live seminar, someone invariably would stop me and say, Alt-D-F, that seems really confusing. How are we ever going to remember that? And they would point out that right here, there is a little yellow triangle with an exclamation point. And if you open that, the second choice says convert to number, right? I knew it, like in a room full of 100 people, there'd be one person who's like, hey, there's a much easier way to do that just with convert to number. The issue is that in the old days, like a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, the convert to number was incredibly slow because they would convert A2 to a number and then recalc the whole spreadsheet, and then A3 to a number and recalc the whole spreadsheet, and then A4 to a number. So you would do that, and sometimes your computer would lock up for 7 or 8 minutes because it was just doing thousands of recalcs before it returned control to you. Finally, Microsoft has fixed that, and convert to number is now a super fast way to go, right? So if you've been avoiding convert to number because in the past you got stuck with that horrible, 7 or 8 minute recalc, it's not an issue anymore, right? So the good news is convert to number is still there. It's not as geeky as remembering Alt-D-E-F, but what can you do? All right, now, next I want to tackle a myth. And this is, people keep telling me that the lookup table has to be sorted. And well, let's just take a look. Let's take a look. Long ago, up until about 2018, I was on the road a lot. I was doing live seminars, 35 dates a year, eastern half of the country. I was flying a lot. you know, and I'd get stuck on that flight home in a tiny airline seat, no room for a laptop. So I'd pull out the iPad. Now, I flew Southwest enough that I had free Wi-Fi on Southwest. So I'd pull out the iPad and just, you know, check some emails. But then inevitably I'd turn to Twitter, back when it was Twitter, not X. And I had the geekiest thing I would do on Twitter. I would always go look for three things. I'd look for who today tweeted about VLOOKUP or pivot table or Excel, right? And these are always interesting, like to see who today was, you know, had a pivot table event that was important enough for them to go hit Twitter. Like here, Rodney, it is I, master of pivot table and VLOOKUP. When I lied about being proficient in Excel and they asked me to set up a pivot table, never underestimate a pivot table. This is Deborah. I know Deborah. She actually has a useful tool there. Beginner learns VLOOKUP. Intermediate learns index and match. A shout out to the 5 index and match people we have. And then the advanced assigns work to the intern. All right. But I started to notice that there was some guy, and just about every single day, this guy was posting a very annoying tweet. You know, like these are just funny tweets. You know, it's great. So this is VLOOKUP and pivot table. But when you get to Excel, you started to get non-spreadsheet things. Like the word Excel is a word, right? You know, so like here, Willie Mays, in order to Excel, you must be completely dedicated, retweeted 76 times. People used to love to post that quote. Or here, I just want it to excel in my career, make money, travel, and be happy. Like, I don't think she's talking about spreadsheets. But here, this is the annoying one. Cocoon FX Media Limited. Excel tip. VLOOKUP, make sure the first column is sorted and you name the data you're analyzing. Okay, I kind of get name the data you're analyzing. That would be the third way to specify the table. But, you know, here we have this guy who's saying, make sure the data is sorted. And in general, that's just not true. All right, so I went out to my own Twitter. I said, all right, what percentage of your VLOOKUP formulas end in false for an exact match? And right away, Chris Murphy came back and, you know, he's like 100%. And as I started to get more and more replies, haven't had to use true or one so far, 99.9999. May have used true once, another 99.9. My friend Sylvia, 99. 99, 100, 100, 99 plus, right? The only person who came back with an actual answer was Lewis. And he says, 80% I use approximate reference tables instead of nested if statements. Okay, and we're gonna talk about that. And I agree. Like I'm 99%. The 1% is only comes up when someone in a seminar says, well, you know, what is the comma true version? Right. So let's take a look at the rare times that you would use comma true. All right, so here I have an invoice. You know, these are all the invoices for the month, who the sales rep was, how much the invoice was for. And then we have this nice little bonus table here. And the way that the bonus table works is there's tiers. It's a tiered bonus system. So if you get a $5,000 sale, you get a $5 bonus. $10,000 sale, you get a $12 bonus. $20,000 sale, $50 bonus. And then the magic 25,000 or larger sale, you get the $100 bonus. And, you know, a lot of times people will attack this with an if statement, but it's a nested if statement. It gets to be pretty ugly. But in this case, you know, like we can look at Carol at 12,835 and see that she qualifies for the $12 bonus. Like it's very easy for us to see that, even though the typical VLOOKUP is going to say, oh, no, I don't see a 12,835 in the table. So here's my lookup table, F4, comma 2, comma false. By the way, false and 0 are the same thing. So it's a little bit shorter to put a 0 there. It's just going to say, no, I don't see a 12,835. All right. But if we change that false to a true or to a 1 or just leave it off, then what Excel does, it says, I'm going to go look for 12,835. But if I can't see it, I'm going to go back to the next lower value. And sure enough, we get the 12. Now here, 19,364, it's above 10,000, hasn't gotten to 20,000, so still gets to 12. You know, even if it got to 19,999.99999, you know, that number, even though we're seeing 20,000 there, let's increase the number of decimals. You know, it's not at 20,000, so you still qualify for the next lower value, right? So this is the only time that you should ever use comma true or leave that last parameter off. One day, I was flying home from a seminar, and I go and I search, and I search Twitter for VLOOKUP, And I get a fairly young looking person, probably just fresh out of college, who had just tweeted, OMG, I've been leaving the comma false off my VLOOKUPs for the last 6 months. And that's just horrific, right? Because that means that 99% of our VLOOKUPs were correct. But every once in a while, there's a VLOOKUP that's not correct. And what a horrible thing to discover. Like, why Excel made comma true be the default is just beyond me. So that is definitely a myth, that VLOOKUP in general does not have to be sorted unless you're doing one of those really rare situations where you're doing a range lookup. You have the tiered levels and you need to do that. All right. I know this is quick. Here we are at 12:24, but let's put up our next CPE question, poll question.
Wait, give me 1 second.
All right. Okay, so this is your opinion. What percentage of your VLOOKUPs end in false for an exact match? A, 100%, B, 99.9, C, 99, or D, and if you're out there, hey, Lewis, 80%. The 80%, sometimes tax tables, or bonus programs. But in general, for me, it's almost always comma false or comma zero at the end.
We're getting a few more seconds. All right, last call. Okay.
All right, good.
There you
So
go.
I'm gonna add up the top three, the 99 and above, and it looks like we're at 90%. That's good. A few of you are using the comma true now and then. All right, good. Next up, we're going to talk about VLOOKUP to another sheet. And I realized for the longest time, whenever I did my VLOOKUP examples, I was always just doing the VLOOKUP off to the right-hand side. And in real life, that's probably not how we do it. Like, you have your data here, description and price, and then somewhere else in the workbook, or maybe even in another workbook, you have your lookup table, right? So we have to be able to start on one sheet and build a formula that's going to point to the other sheet. So my way to do this equal VLOOKUP. I'm looking up A2, right? And I know that I'm going to copy this formula to the right. I'm going to copy it from D to E. So in both cases, I want to make sure that I'm pointing to A2. So that means I have to press the F4 key 3 times. The first press of F4 is going to lock down both the A and the 2. And then the second press locks down just the 2, which is not good at all. And then the third press locks down just the A. So that says, as I copy this formula to the right, we're always going to go back and look at the item number in column A. All right, so now here we are at table array. While I'm in the middle of building this formula, I just take the mouse and I go click on the worksheet that has that table and very carefully select the table. Pay attention to whether or not they put the dollar signs in. If you're in another workbook, the dollar signs automatically appear, right? But in this case, because I'm in the same workbook, they don't, so I have to press F4. All right, and now it's kind of tough because we can't see the original worksheet. What was next? Was it description and then price, or was it price and then description? I'm going to assume it was description and then price. So comma 2, comma false. And we'll just make sure that when I get back there, when I press enter, yeah, that was description. And then I copy that over. I'm going to get the description again. I just have to edit the formula and change the 2 to a 3, that, and then double click to copy that down, right? So, it works out. Even if your worksheet, your lookup tables on another sheet or on another workbook, just have both workbooks open. If you have to switch to the other workbook, you come here to view, switch windows, and you can switch over to the other workbook, while you're building the formula. And the beautiful thing about that is it builds the syntax for you. Like here, lookup table, because I have no spaces in that name, it doesn't have to be surrounded in apostrophes. When you do have to put apostrophes around the sheet name, I can never remember, does the exclamation point go inside or outside? Right, so it's just simple by taking the mouse and going to point to it. All right, so that's building a lookup to another sheet. Next, just real quick, we're going to talk about HLOOKUP. The V in VLOOKUP stands for vertical. It means that the table is arranged vertically down the page. And there is a function for someone who built the table going the wrong way. Like this table here is going across the page. So in theory, what you should do is use HLOOKUP, H standing for horizontal. But what I really do is I just copy this, Control C, and I'll paste special and choose transpose, which is the fancy way for turning that data back to the normal way, and then use VLOOKUP. All right, so either way, Either way will work. All right, before we leave VLOOKUP, I get this question, not every seminar I do, but a lot of times, maybe 50% of the time. Someone will come up to me at the break after I talk about VLOOKUP, and they're like, hey, I got this situation where I need to use VLOOKUP to return all of the results. And VLOOKUP will only return the first result. If we went and looked for turkey, the turkey sandwich, the only thing it's going to be able to return is flow and $5.99. I can't get it to return anything else. Like I can't get it to return the second or third or fourth versions of that, right? So my question to them is, well, what do you want to do with, like, let's say we could find all the turkeys. Do you want to add them up? Or do you want to just concatenate them together with a comma in between? And two different formulas that we use there. If they say that they want to add them up, then we're going to switch from VLOOKUP to doing a SUMIFS. SUMIFS says, hey, we're going to add up all the numbers in column J where the sandwich type in column I is equal to whatever the sandwich is. So we're looking for all the turkeys, get those, and sum the numbers, right? So to do a VLOOKUP to return all values, it's not a VLOOKUP at all. You're going to switch over to SUMIFS. And then this one came along in Excel 2017. This is actually a great formula, the text join formula. It says between each item, we're going to put a comma space. So that's what do they call it? They call that the delimiter. And then really important here for the second argument, for ignore empty, we say, yes, don't give me any empty cells. And then here we do this beautiful thing where we go look at all of the sandwiches in column I and see if it's equal to turkey. And if it is, then give me the name from column H. So isn't that cool? It's going to the left, which VLOOKUP generally can't do. You can see this is a new feature there. You see that tooltip when I selected that part of the formula? It's showing me a lot of quotes. So the quotes essentially are like empty cells, but we can see that Flo, Hank, Nan, Quentin, and Sam are the people that ordered turkey, and that gets returned to the text join function. And now I get a list separated by commas of all the people who ordered that sandwich, right? So is it possible to return all the results? Yes, you can do that. But we're switching over to either SUMIFS or text join. Both of those, though, are great. All right, so that's kind of the end of the VLOOKUP section. Next up, let's talk about index and match. You know, and my biggest problem with index and match is that it's two functions. And for me, when I discovered something that I would have to switch over to index and match, it was something, you know, that maybe I would have to do, you know, once every 2 months, and I would get 2 months out and I couldn't remember how to do it. I remember I actually had 3 sticky notes on my wall, and one of those sticky notes was drawing for me how to use the index with the match inside. Do the match to figure out where it is, and then put that inside the index. So index and match can do several things that VLOOKUP can't do. It can do a two-way lookup. It can do a VLOOKUP to look for the value just larger. And it's really good when we have 12 months of VLOOKUPs to return. So let's take a look at those for index and match. All right, so just larger. This is, earlier we had a bonus, like how much bonus do you qualify for that $10,000 sale? But here we have a touring company, right? So they take a reservation. Hey, we got 11 people. So what vehicle do you need to fit 11 people, let's say? Well, here's the vehicles they have. They have a motorcycle, a car, a van, a tour van, or a bus, right? So those 11 people will fit in a tour van. So in this case, I need to go find the value just larger. Like if they had exactly 12, that's fine. I can do the tour van. But if there's not an exact match, then I need to find the value that's just larger. So we start out by doing equal match. Match says, go look for 2 passengers in this range over here. I'll press F4. And then the match type, see, in VLOOKUP, it was either false for an exact match or 1 true for an approximate match, which really meant just smaller. But here we have the ability to say greater than. Right? And so that will find that if you have 2 people, it's going to suggest a car, which is in the 4th row of that range. Now, that really isn't useful to know that it's in the 4th row of that range, because then you're going to have to come down here and count all the time. So that match is doing a lot of the work, but then we have to send that match to the index function. The index function is, here's a list of possible answers. Press F4, and then it says, which row do you want? Well, I use the match to determine which row. And so for each of these groups of passengers, I'll know what kind of car or even a motorcycle for this A104, which is one person. I hope it doesn't rain that day. All right, so there we're using an index and a match in order to figure out the next larger value. Frustrating is something that VLOOKUP can't do. It's also good for a two-way match. So here we want to figure out, a certain account number, and we want to figure out a certain month. All right. So for me, I always build this in 3 just because it's easier for me to think about it. For which row, I want to go look for A315 in this list of accounts over here, F4, comma 0. I want an exact match for the match type. It tells me that A315 is in the 10th row of A2 to A20. See, it's actually in row 11, but it's telling me of this range, the red range is the 10th row. And then which column? So match can go both ways. It can go sideways, like an HLOOKUP would do, has no problem with that. Go find Feb in those 5 months, F4, comma 0. And so now I have these 2 useless bits of information that tell me that I need the 10th row and 2nd column from those answers. From that 2 bits of useless information, we're going to use the index function. Here's all the possible answers. Press F4, which row, it's this row, which column, it's that column. And there's our answer. So one index with 2 matches allows me to do a 2-way lookup. Now, I don't have to leave it as 3, of course. What you can do is you can say, all right, well, I'm referring to J5 here. Let's go grab the formula from J5, everything but the equal sign. So I just scoop that out from edit mode, Control C, and then come here to J5 and paste like that. Halfway done. And then I go to J6. I scoop out everything except for the equal sign and select J6 and paste. And I get this crazy long formula, index, match, and match, that does something that in theory the VLOOKUP's not going to do. The VLOOKUP could do it if you put a match for the 3rd argument, but in general, it's not going to do it. Okay, so both of these are cool things that index and match can do. But the place, I always envision running into an index and match person in a dark alley, right? And a fight ensues. And the place where they're going to beat me every single time is when I have to do 12 columns of VLOOKUP. When I have to go find A308 in this table and get January, February, March, all the way through December. This is the place where index and match just ran circles around me. For me, I would be able to build the first formula for February without a problem. Let's make that a little bit larger so we can see it. I'd build that first formula for February without a problem. But then as I copied that formula across, see, I was really smart about the single $sign before the A, so I'm always looking at A6. But as I copied that across, I would have to come here and edit the 2 to change to a 3, and then the 3 to change to a 4, and so on. And that was just so frustrating to have to change that formula 11 times. I want one formula I can just copy and have all the answers. Now, there's other workarounds here. Like some people will use the column function, very clever way to, like this is a super geeky way to write the number 2, asking for the column of BB. And you see right there, you get a 2. And as that copies to the right, it automatically changes to the column of CC, right? It's a geeky way to do it. But it's a little bit slow. Or like down below the data, hide the numbers 2 through 13 and then refer to those numbers, B181, right? And that would be a way to work, right? But the index and match people, they just simply won this argument every single time. What they would do is they would insert an extra column B here with a single match, and that match said, go find A308 in column Q and tell me what row it's in. It's in row 208. Once I know what row it's in, then index is really, really fast. We're going to go to look through all of the items in column R in January, and I have a $sign just the 6 and the 229, and then which row I want the 208th value there. And that formula copies across really easily, no editing of each formula, lightning fast. Like if we would, there's people that measure how fast formulas calculate, and this was calculating 12% of the time of 12 lookups, VLOOKUPs. It was just the winner every single time, right? So I completely get it. If you're an index and match person, yeah, your index and match can do things that my VLOOKUP can't do, and every single time, I completely respect your index and match. The reason that I use VLOOKUP is more people understand VLOOKUP. Well, today we have 100 people that answered that question, and 5 of you were index and match people. The other 95 we're either XLOOKUP or VLOOKUP people. right? So it's a more common language. If you run into people who are using Excel 20, 30, 40 hours a week, there's a good chance they're using VLOOKUP or maybe XLOOKUP. All right, so two camps, the VLOOKUP camp and the index and match camp. And Joe McDade, who's on the Excel team, he's actually an index and match guy, but he said, this isn't good that we have these two different camps. Wouldn't it be nice if we created a new function that made both camps incredibly happy? Something that index and match can't do, and something that VLOOKUP can't do. And so they came out with XLOOKUP. And so let's take a look here at XLOOKUP and the various options there. Let me open that XLOOKUP file. The 12 benefits of XLOOKUP. All right, so we're going to build our first XLOOKUP here, just like that first VLOOKUP. It starts out feeling very similar, where we specify that we want to look for W25-6. But now, instead of table array, we're at something called lookup array, and that means just a single column or a single row. So where are those part numbers found? W25-6 is going to be found here in column L. I'm still going to press F4. And then rather than asking for the third column price, I actually get to go specify those cells. Again, press F4. In VLOOKUP, we put a comma false or a comma 0 here, but Joe said, look, 99.9% of the time, people are putting comma false. Let's not make them put comma false. Let's just assume it's comma false. Let's just assume they want an exact match. So we just simply end right there. So it's already shorter. We get our answer, double click and copy it down, and life is great. Sometimes if I have a friendly conversation with the index and match people, they're like, your VLOOKUP is too frail. It's going to break. I'm like, what do you mean it's going to break? And they say, well, if someone inserts a column in the middle of your table. I'm like, yeah, we don't insert columns in the middle of our table. Like, that would be ridiculous. Why would we do that? But let's say that someone did break in and a bad actor came in and inserted a column here. You see that with XLOOKUP, it has no problem adapting to that. Like VLOOKUP would break there. But with XLOOKUP, because we specified 08 to 035, or actually we specified N8 to N35, it just moves. Like as that range moves over, it continues to work. So it's less fragile, I guess, right? So yeah, inserting a column there, we just did that one. Okay. The new way in the old days, Microsoft would come out with a new version of Excel every 3 years. Like, for example, there was Office 2003, then Office 2007. That was 4 years, 2010, 2013, 2016. But now we get new features every Tuesday, or if you're on the monthly channel, once a month. So the great thing about XLOOKUP is it came out as a beta version first, probably goes to just 1 million people, which out of 750 million people using Excel, that's a small percentage. I had a video the first day it came out, hey, check out this great new XLOOKUP. And one of my regular viewers, a guy named Rico S from Scotland, he comments, he's like, they had a huge opportunity here since they're creating a new function. They could have wrapped the if NA function right inside the function. So we don't have to wrap it around, and it would be faster and just more elegant. And so I actually wrote to Joe McDade. I said, hey, Joe, check out this comment on my YouTube channel. This guy named Rico has a really good idea, like that if NA should have been built right in. And the beautiful thing about it is, because it hasn't gone to all 750 million people yet, Joe has time to adjust. And he then added the fourth argument here called if not found. So you see, I have some NAs getting returned here because they're not the right item number. And I can choose what to put there. I can put like not found, or I can put 0, or whatever makes sense. And it's just built right in, right? So that's a great example of why this beta program it is good. It'll work out fine. All right, so if NA is just built right in. It's funny. VLOOKUP cannot look to the left. Here, actually, I think I have a poster somewhere here. Yeah. So this great poster from Bobby Rosenstock at Just a Jar Design Press in Marietta, Ohio. A value to the left is VLOOKUP's kryptonite. this message brought to you by index and match with an example of index and match. You know, it was funny, VLOOKUP just couldn't go to the left. And the XLOOKUP or the index and match people would say, oh, well, that's a weakness. And I'm like, is it really a weakness? You know, because I'm really good at copy, Control C, and paste. You know, I can get it to the right of wherever it needs to be. But now, you know, it works out really well. We can just do the XLOOKUP of W25-6. The part numbers are here, F4. The thing I'm looking up is to the left. No hassles. It just works, right? So, you know, that small, sort of silly argument from the index and match people that it can't look left, well, XLOOKUP will be able to do that. All right. Now, let's get to the one thing that index and match could do really well that VLOOKUP couldn't do, and that was the range lookups for just larger or just smaller. They are built in here. So we can easily do the XLOOKUP and find, here's the bonus program with that -1 out there for the match mode. And -1 says exact match or next smaller item. Or over here, which car to get XLOOKUP with a 1 with exact match or next larger item. One little frustrating thing here is that for those of you who like to use match, it was +1 for less than and -1 for greater than. And there's good historical reasons going back 30 years why it ended up that way. But Joe's like, we're not constrained by that stupid reason from 30 years ago. We're going to do it the right way where a +1 means the exact match or next larger item. -1 means the exact match or next smaller item. So you just have to adjust your thinking for the few index and match people. You can go just larger or just smaller. The HLOOKUP works fine. When we specify the lookup array and the return array, they can be horizontal, so no hassles there. All right, this one is pretty wild. This is something that neither VLOOKUP nor match could do. And it was like, look at this. This is video 1083. I'm up to video 2600, so that was like 1500 videos ago. Someone sent in a question where they wanted to find the last result. They wanted VLOOKUP to look from the bottom. And it was a crazy formula that took me 7 minutes to explain. You know, it was just a hideous formula. But now it's just really simple. We have a argument that says search first to last or search last to first. So the example back then, it was a fleet of farm vehicles. Every time the vehicle came in, they logged the date and what the mileage was. And they just want to know, like, what's the mileage? You know, what's the most recent value, searching from the bottom. And I suppose you could use max ifs or something like that. But, you know, just by specifying that -1 for search last to first, it searches from the bottom and finds the last one. All right. This is a crazy one. I never knew that VLOOKUP was treating 3 characters not as the characters they were, but as wildcard characters. If you were looking up something that had an asterisk or a question mark or a tilde, they were treating that in a special manner. And, you know, I actually have a situation here where I'm looking up Walmart in this table, but I'm getting the answer for Wallboard Mart. The company where I worked for, we made handheld computers, and Walmart was our largest customer. And the wonderful lady who sat 2 cubes down from me in accounting, in our accounts receivable department, Walmart was her account to collect, right? And she noticed on the store, like it was Wall Star Mart back then. It's not anymore. There's a sunburst at the end. But she put an asterisk in our company database, right? So we were customer 92050 was Walmart, Wall Star Mart. And I am just horrified that 30 years ago, I was probably getting the wrong answer now and then because of that asterisk. So the good news is XLOOKUP can treat it as a wildcard, but you specifically have to go out to that 5th argument and say, I want you to treat it as a wildcard. Otherwise, it's just going to look for Wall Star Mart. Right? So there'll be less accidental answers happening then. Okay, all of that is great, but here's just the most amazing part of this. The place where the index and match people would always beat me was when I had to do 12 months of XLOOKUP, and watch how amazing this is. When I do 12 months of VLOOKUP, watch how amazing this is. I'm going to do an XLOOKUP of A308, and I'm looking for it in column O. I'll press F4. And then this is the part where I say what I want. I want to get January, let's say, but I don't want just January. I want to return all 12 months. So if I choose all the columns like that, Control Shift down arrow, press F4, and then close. Think about this. This is one single formula that's going to go find A308. It takes a long time to find A308, relatively. It's going to find it, and it's going to just copy it, all 12 answers that it finds next to it, very, very quickly. So it's faster than index and match. Doesn't require the extra formula. Single formula, definitely better than VLOOKUP in, you know, in every way. But, you know, just fabulous. All right, I'm going to end XLOOKUP right there because I won't have time to talk about the others. But we've actually gotten to the point where we have XLOOKUP and the 12 benefits. So let's put up that fourth polling question if we could.
Give me 1 second.
All right.
All right, there you go.
What's your favorite feature of XLOOKUP? Is it A, return all 12 months in one formula? B, return values just higher or just lower? C, search from the bottom. And then D is one that I skipped because it's pretty obscure. So don't go with D as the answer unless you happen to know, then feel free. So.
Give it like 10 more seconds.
All right.
All right, last call, guys. All right.
All right, good. I love that. Return all 12 months in one formula, about 73% of the people. That's really the one that's just amazing. Just amazing. Okay. Perfect. Let's talk about the old lookup function. You know, for me, the very first spreadsheet I ever used was Lotus 123. But if we go even back further than that, it was VisiCalc. And VisiCalc had a lookup function. It wasn't a V or an H. It was just called lookup. And it was a crazy function in that it always looked for whatever you were looking for in the leftmost column of the table and returned whatever was the last column of the table. You know, it was a crazy function. And it was always doing the range version of the lookup. The couple things that lookup is still there. And if you go into Excel help, they'll say, this is just there for backwards compatibility. Like no one should ever use it. But it does a couple of things. Remember my example here where we had to find how much bonus Carol got for her 12,835. The old lookup function actually would go look up all of these values, press F4 in this table. F4, we want the second one and true. Actually, we don't have to put the true, it's just there. Look at me, I am. So G2, that's the lookup table, F4, and the results vector is here, F4. Yep. And that lookup is going to go do all the lookups at once. Like VLOOKUP wouldn't do this very well. Circular reference, screwed something up. G2 to G6. All right. Well, anyway. Yes. And then I can send that whole thing into the sum function. So it could do all of the lookups at once. If you're just trying to book a reserve for the bonus, you know, that was a faster formula. And then it also did this really weird thing where you could look up a vertical table with horizontal results, which, you know, is just one of those weird things that even XLOOKUP to this day can't do, right? So that's the one thing that XLOOKUP can't do, this twisted lookup, where it's looking up a C in this vertical table and returning a horizontal table. So yeah, can't do that. All right, so that's the old lookup function. It's still there. It's probably a good way to win a bar bet if you're with a bunch of Excel geeks. All right, let's talk about these other functions. Choose has been around forever. Switch, and then the newish Excel 19 gave us the ifs function. So we'll take a look at those three. All right, choose. Choose is like, here's my lookup table over here, but I don't want to have to put a lookup table in the list. So we have 5 different rate plans called 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. The rate plans are starting at 1. That's really important for choose, and they need to be nearly sequential. Like I'm missing a 5 here, but I can code for that, right? So the choose function is looking up A4, and then these answers here, if A4 contains a 1, we're going to get that. If it contains a 2, we're going to get that. 3, 4. There is no 5, so just put a 0 in there. And then a 6, right? So sometimes you can just not have a lookup table and use the choose function, provided they were all nice low numbers and nearly in sequence. You know, if you had 5 numbers that were spread out with 10 blanks in between them, it would just be a whole lot of commas and not very cool. So the choose function is good. But then in February of 2017, they gave us the switch function. And switch is pretty wild. So switch says, hey, here's the thing we're going to go look at. We're going to go look at the rate plan over at A5. And then we give it pairs of values. So if switch is equal to 45, then the cost is 5. If switch is equal to 51, then the cost is 7. If switch is equal to 65, the cost is 9. 77, the cost is 15. And 87, the cost is 20. And then the very last thing you put is what happens if it's none of those? And you just put something like unexpected. And so it's pairs of values until the last one. And then so it'll go return the correct cost. Kind of a cool little formula. And if we have something that was missing, let's just put in a value 177, a typo there, then you get the unexpected. So it handles that. All right. And then the last one, this is ifs. Didn't change the heading here, ifs. It's kind of like replacing a nested if. So you start out with the first test. If A4 is equal to 45, then the cost is 5. If it's equal to 51, then the cost is 7. If it's equal to 65, then the cost is 9, and so on. The weird thing about this one is that for the default value, it needs to have something that evaluates to true, which in this case, we put the true value, and that allows you to put a missing at the end, right? So 3 kind of newer functions. Choose, it was rare that I would have something that I could use choose, but every once in a while, you'd come up with something. It's much more likely that you're going to have something where switch would work. You know, and then the advantage is you don't have to put that lookup table off to the side. So kind of a cool alternative there. So choose, switch, and ifs. All right, these are really new. Choose calls with pivot by. I love these. This is the first time I've ever shown this example. Actually, let's do this one. Okay, so you're seeing a couple of things here that you probably have never seen before. The first one is a brand new function called pivot by. Pivot by is a way to create something that looks a lot like a pivot table, but with a formula. And the only advantage of this over a pivot table is I don't have to click refresh. If the underlying data changes, this will automatically recalculate. So in the pivot by function, I'm specifying which fields to have in the rows area and which fields to have in the values area, what function to use, and then this is controlling whether I'm showing headings and whether or not there's subtotals. But check out this amazing little extra step I did here, in that I have slicers that allow me to choose which fields to return to the pivot table. So if I want to see both cost and sales, I select those, and the choose columns function is where I say that I want to see, oh wait, why didn't that update? Oh no, I screwed it up. Let me try this one. Cost and sales. There's just cost. Yep. So there's our pivot table with just cost. There's our pivot table with just sales. I choose them both, and I get a pivot table with cost and sales. Like, this is pretty crazy, changing the pivot result just based on what I'm selecting from the list. So I get category, or let's do region and rep. So that makes sense. Within region, we show rep, or within category, we show product. And this is all driven by the choose column. So choose column says, here's all of the data. And in this particular case, I want the category, the third and fourth columns. So choose calls 3, 4 will give me the category and product and return it to the pivot by. So while choose has been around for a long time, this new choose calls or the choose rows are just great ways to do some cool things there with, you know, something that doesn't look like a pivot table. All right, let's just do, I just have to try this file account and update. Microsoft is saying that there's a new function coming out, but we're not allowed to talk about it until it comes out, right? And so I keep refreshing all the time today. So we'll have to save that one for another day, right? So let's call it there. We're at 59 after the hour. Steph, I'll throw it back to you.
All right, well, that concludes our webinar. So like I said before, the recording will be sent out tomorrow, so just keep a lookout for that. And we'll also include Bill's book and other resources. And maybe if that function does come out, maybe we could mention that too.
Let's do that. Yeah,
so
maybe a little video on that.
Yeah, let me know. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's great.
And then if you answer 3 out of the 4 poll questions, you'll receive the CPE credit within like the next week. And that'll be from Bill directly as well. So just keep a lookout for that. But yeah, that's it. So thank you again, everybody. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thanks for signing in today, and thanks for sponsoring. I appreciate that. Thanks, Stephanie.
All right, bye, everybody.